Kidney disease is one of the most frightening things that I've observed skyrocketing over the last 20 or so years. It's now estimated that maybe in the next 30 years that half the population will have a weakened kidney. Now this is from high protein levels in the blood serum, that the body cannot break down these undigestible proteins. And what happens, it puts a taxation on the kidney, and slowly but surely the kidney stops functioning. Kidney dialysis is where you end up, and it's not pretty, where you spend a minimum of 3 days a week in a hospital, 3 to 4 hours, and you can never leave that pattern. So when you travel, you have to be arranging with the hospital. When you're home, 12 hours to 15 hours a week, you'll be in a hospital or a clinic. You don't want that to happen. Now, over the decades, we've been able to help so many people that were on that track to demise, stop it and reverse it. But here's an interesting thing. Some of the foods I would tell the average person to eat for health, and it almost is universally good for everyone, once you have destroyed the kidney, the high potassium and very rich, nutritious food can be damaging and dangerous. It's why you probably got sick to begin with. You didn't have adequate amount of potassium and adequate amounts of phosphorus and too much protein. Now, after you've weakened your kidney, we've got to minimize those foods. So at Hippocrates, we tailor these programs for people with kidney disorders. As you may notice, more and more people that you know, if it's not you, somebody else or in your family, have allergies. Now, allergies, to make this very simple to understand, is when the body cannot take either an unnatural or natural substance in and utilize it, break it down, and metabolize it. So then the body reacts to it. How it generally reacts to it, it puts histamines out that work in coordination with the immune system. So a lot of people, when I've worked with them over the years who have had allergies, said when they are affected, they immediately feel like their entire body's drained, like a battery being drained. That's the histamine working in coordination with the immunity that you feel just like you are predicting, that you are draining, that energy is going out of you, that you no longer have the fight inside of you. Now what we've noticed is that if we can identify the allergen or the family of allergens, because sometimes the doctor doesn't have the time, unfortunately, to do the work necessary, so they'll say you're allergic to this, but they don't take into account or have the time to say there's an entire family of this. So when we discover that, and we do this systematically with you, it's actually better than working with testing, where we have a chart where you take 8 to 10 foods per day, you separate them in the time that you eat them, and you then tell me if it's working well, if it's moderately good, or if it's poor. Now after 2 or 3 months of that, and you charting this, and you give it to our medical team, we can literally identify the families, remove that, and in about 92 to 94% of the cases, after removing that type of food from you, or that environment from you, you'll no longer have the allergy. Of course, along the way you can use herbal medicines, and there are experts in that, homeopathic medicines, and of course, there are some allergens that are very difficult to avoid. Ragweed is an example, but homeopathic tinctures have proven to be very, very effective on that in our work over the years. Heart disease is one of those oxymoron names. It's really not a disease in about 95, 96, maybe 97% of the cases. There is something called a heart disease where a valve is not working. You may have scar tissue. The other 95 or so percent is literally poor lifestyle. So you've clogged up your arteries with plaque. You basically are not circulating blood by movement through it. You're stressed, and stress contracts, just like when you feel stressed, it contracts the vein that probably most likely has, cholesterol in it and plaque in it from what you've been consuming and the lack of movement you've had. But there's another agent that most people do not speak about. Just last week I spoke to a gentleman who I happen to know that's living the way I've told him to live for the last 7 years. He exercises as much as me, which is good amounts of exercise. And by the way, he almost had a stroke. He went into the doctor, and the doctor showed his veins going into his brain were clogged. I said, "How about your teeth?" He looked at me and said, "Yes." We sent him to a dentist. Half of his teeth had infection. He had periodontal disease. So beyond the fact that you eat bad, don't exercise, and get stressed, which sounds like the average person today, if you have periodontal disease, you could do everything right like this man and still end up with a heart attack or stroke. So it's four-tier consideration that we have when it comes to cardiovascular concerns. There are diseases that, thank God, there's medicine and cardiologists that can help you with that. But what you need to do is help yourself by changing your lifestyle. Osteoporosis is something I've worked with 22,000 women and a handful of men in that. It's not only women. And this is a weightlifting deficiency. You have been conned in believing that it's a calcium deficiency. I do and have conducted over 15 years a very sophisticated nutritional test. And it's about 1 out of 125 women lack calcium, 1 out of 282 men lack calcium. So it's almost a non-existent deficiency. It's rare. I'm surprised when I see a calcium deficiency. What it is that your bones need pressure. They need resistance placed upon them. And if not, they sort of grow loosely, and they have a lot of room between the structure of the bone, the cells that develop the bone. When that happens, it's easy to now have a movement, an elasticity to it that in fact is the osteoporotic condition. So out of the 22,000 people that I've worked with, yes, I changed their diet because one of the culprits beyond not lifting weight are the 3 acids that we get from fish and chicken and red meat and pork and dairy. And dairy, by the way, includes yogurt and kefir and the things I used to love, ice cream and whipped cream and all of that. But bottom line is the 3 acids aren't the big problem. That's a big enough problem. We actually can show you scientific data where the bones pit, so they weaken from the outside from consumption of these animal-based foods. But if you don't lift weight, you're not going to get well. So out of the 22,000 people I've worked with, not one person ever got well unless they lifted weight on a consistent basis. So I'd strongly advise get an exercise physiologist, a trainer. She or he can help you. These are educated people in this field. And then change your diet to a plant-based diet. And if you are going to take supplements, the ones that really do work are biotin, that help bone structure, hair too, silica, and magnesium. And nothing wrong with eating food that has calcium. They discovered that in green leafy plants. And if you cook it, then the availability of the calcium and the magnesium and all the other cofactor minerals that are in there are going to work. Arthritis is something we have massive experience with. It's an inflammatory condition. And you have 2 types, osteoarthritis, that is an interior bone problem, and rheumatoid arthritis. Not only do we work at Hippocrates with this, and have seen so many hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, endless amounts of people adopt a healthy lifestyle and be able to reverse it. But my wife and co-director, Anna Maria, directed a very, very famous European center in Sweden where they were renowned for this. The Swedish government, in fact, would send people to this center because they thought it to be more effective, both economically and for results, than everything else that was being done. So the key factors to arthritic condition is to, along with eating an alkaline diet, which is everything we've talked about, plant-based foods, high nutritious foods, high fluid foods, lots of green juices, wheatgrass, etc. We would also tell people that certain supplementation is really, really expeditious in helping you to recover from this problem. Curcumins from turmeric. The data and research on this from global laboratories and universities is stunning, to be honest with you. Garlic, the consumption of garlic in this, the use of capsicum, which is the medicine or the medicinal part from cayenne pepper. All of this goes a very long way in speeding up that process from arthritis. Movement. One of the best things to do is we take very severe arthritics, we put them into the warm pools at Hippocrates. And when we can get them to move and bring blood and circulation and break up the calcifications, for the lack of a better term for it. It's very helpful in moving that whole process along. But it's very, very rare you don't see somebody make real progress very rapidly.